All right. We're in business. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Again, I've got my excellent natural lighting going on once again, so at least Lauren looks normal in the picture. It's great to see you. It's great to be back together again. We're going to get started, as we always do, with a little bit of warm-up singing. So you'll just follow along. Can't you follow along? We'll have a good time. Yallai lai lai la lai lai yallai lai lai la lai lai yallai lai lai la lai 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 ai lai lai la lai lai yallai lai lai la lai lai ai lai lai la lai lai ai ai lai Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're going to open our Sidurim to page 186 to begin our service with thanks and gratitude. And we've got a couple new or perhaps known melodies this week. So, Cantor, take it away. Page 192, Matavu at the top of the page. Okay, we're going to turn now to page 195, and we'll read together in English at the top of the page, a blessing for our bodies. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. With divine wisdom you have made our bodies, combining veins, arteries, and vital organs into a finely balanced network. Wondrous maker and sustainer of life, were one of them to fail, how well we are aware. We would lack the strength to stand before you. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of our health and strength. Baruch atah Adonai, rofech kol basar umafli lasot. And we'll turn now to page 196.
Ata
rise in body or spirit now as we turn to page 198. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lasach v'ivina lavchin ben yom u'ben laila. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam rokah haaretz al hamayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish arumim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam anoten layav koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavir shena me'einai utnuma me'afapai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tzelem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael bigvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. If you're still standing at home, please be seated. We're now on page 205, and we'll read the second reading down from the top of the page. From the cowardice that shrinks from new truth, from the laziness that is content with half-truths, from the arrogance that thinks it knows all truth, O God of truth, deliver us. Blessed is Adonai, teacher of Torah to your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, hamelamed Torah l'amo Yisrael. We're now on page 206. Elu devarim she'ein lahem shiur, she'adam ochel protehem ba'olam hazeh, ve'hakeren kayemet lo la'olam haba, ve'elu hen kibud avayim ugemilut chasadim, ve'hashkamat beit hamidrash shacharit ve'aravit, ve'achnasat orchim uvikur cholim, ve'achnasat kala lebayat hamet ve'yun tefila, ve'havat shalom min adam lachavero, ve'talmud Torah keneged kulam. We rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 212 for the opening blessing of Pezukei de Zimra. Baruch shehamar v'haya ha'olam baruch hu, baruch hoseh v'reshit, baruch omer v'yosef, baruch gozer u'mekayem, baruch merachem al haaretz, baruch merachem al habriot, baruch meshalem sachar tov lireav, baruch chai la'ad v'kayam lanetzach, baruch bodeh u'matzil, baruch shemo, v'shvachot u'v'zmirot negadelcha, unshabechecha nefaercha v'naskir shimcha v'namlichecha malkeinu Eloheinu, Yachid chei ha'olamim, melech meshubach u'mafoar deyad shemo hagadol, baruch atah Adonai, melech mehulal batishbachot. We're now on page 214. If you're still standing at home, please be seated. We're the second line down in Hebrew. Tov lehodod l'Adonai, Tov lehodod l'Adonai, ulezamer, ulezamer, leshimcha עליון, טוב להודות לאדוני, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, ואמונתך בלילות, טוב להודות לאדוני. עלי אסור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור, כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידך רנן. מה גדלו מעשיך היה, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך היה, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך היה, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. Now on page 215. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, Oni Hallelujah, Oni Hallelujah. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, Selah. Continue silently. Ashrei. V'anachnu nevarech yam, me'ata ve'ad olam, me'ata ve'ad olam, me'ata ve'ad olam. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Psalm 150, page 218. Hallelujah, 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 El Bekocho, hallelujah, Berkiawazo, hallelujah, Migurota, hallelujah, Kerov Kulo, hallelujah, 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 V'teka shofar, hallelujah, v'neve v'chinor, hallelujah, v'tofu machor, hallelujah, b'minim ve'ugab, hallelujah, 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 Hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. Hallelu, Betzil Tzalei Shama. Hallelu, Betzil Tzalei Trua. Kol Anshama, Tehallelujah. Hallelu, hallelujah. Hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. Hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. Hallelu, hallelu, hallelu. Hallelu, hallelu, hallelujah. Kendra, did you want to sit down and take notes for this section? Okay. We're now on page 219. Nishmat kol achai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. We continue silently to the bottom of the page. Now on page 220 at the very top. Ilufinu maleh shira kayam Ushonehinu rina kamon galav Vesivtotenu shevach kemarcheve rakia Vehinehenu mehirot kashemesh Vechayareach Veyadenu frusot kenishrei shamayim Veragleinu kalot kahayalot Ein anachnu maspikim lehodot lecha Adonai Eloheinu Ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu. We continue silently on to the next page. We are now on page 222, the second paragraph in Hebrew. Shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatu v'rahanenu tzadikim b'Adonai la yesharim na'abat tehilah Befi yesharim titalalu divrei tzadikim titbarachu bilshon chasidim titromamu v'kerev kedoshim titkadashu v'ma kehalot Rivebotam chabeit Yisrael merina yitbar Shimcha malkeinu bechol dor Vador yababai yababai bye 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 Yababai yababai bye bye Yai bye bye, yai bye bye, ya bye bye, bye bye bye. Ya bye bye, ya bye bye, yai bye bye. Yishtamach shimecha lahad malkeinu. Ahel hamelech hagadol v'hakadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Ki lecha na'e Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Sheru shvacha halav v'zimraha uzumem shala netzach Gedula u'gvura tila v'tiferet kedusha u'malchut Brachot ve'holaot me'ata v'yad olam Baruch atah Adonai El melech gadol v'tishbachot El ahodaot Adonai niflaot Abocher v'shirei zimra Melech Elchei Haolamim. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemeh Rabbah Be'amad Yivrach Yirutei Be'amlich Malchutei V'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei D'chol Beit Yisrael V'hagala V'zman Kariv V'yimeru Amen. Yesh Merabah Mevarach Le'alam Le'almei Almayav Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitbar V'yitramah V'yitnaseh V'yitadar V'yitalel V'yitalal Shemei Dekudcha B'richu Le'elaha Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechemata Damiran Me'amah V'yimeru Amen. Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vahen. You're still standing. Please be seated at home. We're on page 228. We're going to begin by reading together in English at the bottom and do the 3 lines in Hebrew just above, beginning with the words Or Chadash. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai! In wisdom you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands, and for the lights you created, may they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir. Or Chadash, Al Tzion Ta'ir. V'nizkechu lanu mehera le'oro. V'nizkechu lanu mehera le'oro. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai bim bam, yadadai dai bim bim bam, yadadai dai dai. Baruch atah Adonai Yotzer HaMeorot. We'll turn now to page 230. We'll begin by reading together in English at the top of the page and then the Hebrew at the bottom. How deeply you have loved us, Adonai our God, gracing us with surpassing compassion. On account of our forebears, whose trust led you to teach them the laws of life, be gracious to us, teaching us as well. O merciful one, have mercy on us by making us able to understand and discern, to heed, learn, and teach, and lovingly to observe, perform, and fulfill all that is in your Torah. V'ha'erinenu b'toratecha v'dahabek libeinu mitzvotecha V'yached levabeinu le'ahava u'lira et shemecha V'lo nebosh v'lo nikalem v'lo nikashel le'olam va'ed ki v'shem kodshecha agadol v'hanora batachnu Nagila v'nismecha b'yeshuatecha V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz V'tolichenu kol memiut le'artzeinu Ki el poel Yeshuot ata uvahanu v'charta v'keravtanu le'shimcha hagadol sela b'emet leodot lecha yechidcha b'yahava baruch atah Adonai habocher b'amo Yisrael b'yahava Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Now we'll turn together to page 234. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We'll turn now to page 236. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל, ואמרת עליהם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וריתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. We'll turn now to page 239. We'll read together in English at the top of the page. Emet, there is no place where you are not, even in the wilderness, there is your word. Emet, that pen strokes of lightning, white fire, black flame, stir the soul's passion, guide our sacred way, true and enduring as Torah. Your truth for us is certain and established, now and forevermore. Like Moses, Miriam, and all Israel, we sing out and rejoice. We're now on page 238, last 4 lines in Hebrew. Tehillah le'elyon baruch hu mevorach Moshe u'Miriam u'vnei Yisrael lechanu shirha v'simcha rabba ve'amru chulam mi chamocha ma'elihim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh norat eilot osef elem yai lai 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 shira chadasha shibchu gehulim leshimcha sfatayam yachad kulam hodu והמליכו והאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופדחנו ממך יהודה בישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. In a moment we'll begin the silent Amidah on page 242 together, and then we'll continue silently. Please go at your own pace, and if you are standing you may be seated at the end. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. For those who are still davening your Amidah, please go at your own pace. You can always catch up with us in a minute. Those that are finished, we're going to rise in body or spirit on page 324 for the repetition of the Amidah, and we'll face east wherever we are. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Yomel Chasadim Tovim V'Koneh Hakol וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה נלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע מוריד אתה מכלכל חיים בחסד מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים ומקיים אמונתו לישני עפר מי כמוך בגבורות ומידו מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. We're on page 326. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשממרו ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרז אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך כל הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ורחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור hallelujah. We're now on page 328. לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא יבוש לעולם לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Turn now to page 329. We're seated at home and we will begin at the very top of the page. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עונג שבת מקדשי מקדשי שבי שבת Kulam yismeu v'yitagu mituvecha Shabbat. Yismechu lemalechutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat Bekorei Oneg Shabbat Ve'ashvi Ratzita bo Ve'kidashto Shabbat Chemdat Yamim Oto Kerata Shabbat Yismechu Ve'malechutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat Ve'korei Oneg Shabbat Zecher Lemase Bereshit Shabbat Zecher Lemase Bereshit Shabbat Yismechu ve'malechutecha Shomrei, Shomrei, Shomrei Shabbat Ve'korei Oneg Shabbat Eloheinu v'Eloi Avotenu v'Imotenu Ritzei, Ritzei v'imnuchateinu Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha Sahabeinu mihituvecha v'samecheinu b'shuatecha v'ta'er libeinu le'ovtecha be'emet de'anchileinu Adonai Eloheinu, Ayin, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, 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 Elai, Lai, Lai, Lai. B'ahava uvratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'yinuchuva Israel. Mekadesh Shemecha Baruch Ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. We'll turn now to page 330 and we'll read together in English in the middle of the page. On this Shabbat day, as you graciously receive our prayers, help us to hear your call. Grant us enough health to fulfill our duties and the compassion we need to attend to others. Teach us humility that we may perceive our own faults, and grant us the wisdom to be forgiving of others. Give us the courage to be true to our highest selves, and the charity to see the best in those around us. Give us patience enough not to become discouraged, hope enough to overcome all fears for the future, and faith enough to know your presence. O source of blessing, look with favor upon us. May our offerings be acceptable to you. Baruch Ata Adonai, she'otcha levadcha bira navod. We'll turn now to page 332, and we'll begin reading together in English at the bottom of the page, with each paragraph ending the same way, with the words Modim Anachnu Lach, offering our gratitude to God. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations, Modim Anachnu Lach. For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons, Modim Anachnu Lach. For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements, Modim Anachnu Lach. For human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression, Modim Anachnu Lach. For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared, Modim Anachnu Lach. For all who have labored and suffered for a fair world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom, Modim Anachnu Lach. For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose, Modim Anachnu Lach. We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Baruch Ata Adonai, Hatov Shimcha Ulechanae Lehodot. We turn now to page 334, Sim Shalom. Sim Shalom, Tova Uvracha, Chen V'Chesed V'Rachamim Aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, Barcheinu yotzreinu kulanu kechad, ve'or panecha, ki ve'or panecha natata lanu, Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed, u'tzedaka uvracha berachamim ve'chaim ve'shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha, chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, ve'tov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael, b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום טובה וברכה, chen v'chesed berachamim aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai hamevarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Let's read together on the top of page 337. Prayer is not purely an act. All things pray, and all things pour forth their souls. The heavens pray, the earth prays, every creature and every living thing. In all life there is longing. Creation is itself but a longing, a kind of prayer to the Almighty. What are the clouds, the rising and the setting of the sun, the soft radiance of the moon and the gentleness of the night? What are the flashes of the human mind and the storms of the human heart? They are all prayers, the wordless outpouring of boundless longing for God. Oseh shalom mimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Cantor, you can have a seat for the moment. So, we read this week in Parshat Chukat a lot of goings on, and most significantly, the loss, really, of both Miriam and Aaron. So we have really sort of a heartbreaking parsha. We also have the story of the rock, where Moshe, instead of speaking to the rock, ultimately decides to hit it, and out flows water, but also flows out a punishment that says that neither he nor Aaron will make it to the promised land, and Aaron doesn't even make it out of the parsha. So it's certainly... It's hard. It's a hard parsha to read. But I think, in thinking about it, I really want to focus on one of those losses, in particular on the loss of Miriam. And I want to share just a very quick teaching from, she is the Dean of the Academy for Jewish Religion, which, if you're not familiar with it, on the West Coast, you know about it, Lauren? The Academy? So it is its own seminary. It's distinct from the HUC's LA campus and from the equivalent of JTS on the West Coast, which these days is, I forget. It used to be UJU, and then it's AJU, or one of those, like that's the acronym. It was like, I forget exactly what it is. But the Academy is a well-regarded, well-known seminary. And so the dean, and I'm not sure if she is still the dean there or not, Ora Horn-Prauser, and she writes about an interesting sort of potential read of one of the verses in chapter 20. So if you're following along at home, if you're looking for the beginning of chapter 20, it's on page 922 in the Women's Commentary, and it's on page 1026 in the Plout. So 1026 in the Plout, 922 in the Women's Commentary. And it's sort of, again, one of these enigmatic beginnings because we get very little detail. But in the end, we're told that Miriam dies, right? The Israelites arrive in a body in the wilderness of Zin on the first new moon, and the people that ultimately stayed at Kadesh, and Miriam died there and was buried there. So we get almost no sort of description of exactly what happens, why Miriam dies, why we only get a tiny amount. There's some really wonderful commentary on this in the Women's Torah commentary that is worth reading. But I want to focus less on sort of why it is that Miriam passes and why now, but more on what the immediate impact is, right? We don't go, if her death is described in short terms, the amount of time between her death and calamity is about a millisecond in Torah time. Okay, the next verse we see the community was without water. Okay, and why were they without water? Because according to the tradition, Miriam is really the source of water for the Israelites as they're moving through. God, yes, but through Miriam. Miriam is the one who finds and provides the water. There's some really interesting midrash about Miriam's well that, according to one of the midrash, it was created before time even, one of the few objects like the Torah that was created ahead of time. And so the well is the sort of miraculous thing that appears whenever the Jewish people need it. Some really beautiful midrash, but really in actual fact, forget midrash, it's Miriam, right? It's her. And without her, immediately everything sort of falls apart. And so then you have this interaction between Moses and the rabble, which gets out of control pretty quickly. Okay, and it says in Numbers verse 20, chapter 20, verse 10, it says in Hebrew, Vayikalu Moshe v'Aharon et hakahal el pnei hasela, vayomer lahem shimuna hamorim, hamin hasela hazeh notzi lachem mayim. So this is one of those you can already hear in my inflection. I'm reading it with a certain amount of sarcasm, right? Vayikalu Moshe v'Aharon et hakahal. So Moses then Vaikal, right, to gather up the assembly, to assemble the congregation as it were, El Pnei Hasela, in front of the rock that God has instructed to speak to, and Vayomer Lahem, and he says to them, Shimuna, and this is where we get a really odd word, Hamorim. So he says Shimuna means listen up, pay attention. Ha, in Hebrew, is the definite article, right? Hamorim. Moreh usually is, can't learn, we know? Teacher. Very good. Okay, a morah is a teacher. Okay, that's the main lehorot, right, to teach. Morim are teachers. So he is calling this supposed rabble, right, who've come complaining to him about the water and, once again sort of shaking their fists in Moses' face, which has been going on now for several weeks. And so he responds in a seemingly sort of, sarcastic tone. And the English translation reads, listen, you rebels. It translates morim not as teachers, but as rebels, which is a common translation, largely because of the influence, if I'm not mistaken, of Rashi, but of the commentators who, go through various forms to explain that the word moreh in this case is meant to imply that they are rebellious in some form or another. It's a wordplay of sorts. But, so the different reading is what I want to share with you this morning. It's on my phone because I couldn't find it anywhere else. And again, this comes from Dean Prosser of the Academy, and she says the following, okay, that actually, if you look at the word morim as it is written in the Hebrew, and remembering again that in the Torah itself there is no vocalization, there are no vowels, so ultimately we are really just dealing with what is on the page. And if you look at it closely, without I always forget what it's called, the chirik, right? Without that little dot that makes it morim, the same letters, mem, resh, yud, mem, could also be pronounced how? Any guesses, Cantalar? You're the only one in the room. Don't worry. Miriam. Okay, instead of reading it as morim, she argues it should really be read as Miriam. And why does she say that? She says it's a very different way of reading the verse, and that this is not actually while they have gathered, right, everybody all together. The conversation right now that's happening in the text is not between Moshe and the people, but is actually sort of Moshe to himself, right? Calling out and saying essentially, right, speaking to Miriam of his frustration, right? Without Miriam there, right? Shimuna Miriam, right? How are we gonna do this without you? Right? That it's actually a very introspective moment on Moshe's part in which he is realizing that he is deeply missing his sister, He's deeply missing her leadership and her capacity for handling some of these situations, which are now very clearly starting to test Moses. Right? We've now had several weeks, including last week's failed rebellion of Korach. He is not in a calm or contemplative state. He's in an agitated state. And when you're already in an agitated state, and then you lose first your sister and then your brother, but your sister, again, in this instance, is the real thing that sets everything off, right? Who was the provider not just of the water, but really, again, of the sort of characteristics of water, right? The fluidity of it, the calmness of it. Certainly, water can be raging, but in Miriam's case, she was really a salve. She was a presence not just for Moses, but for the people. And so in this case, it's not really, at least according to Dean Prosser, is not about sort of him sarcastically calling out the people and saying, hey, you rebels, we're going to get this water from you from the rock. But instead is really, again, catching him in a moment of repose, thinking to himself of the loss of his sister and really crying out for her. And while there are several chronological challenges to this argument and logical challenges to this argument, mostly because we learn in the end that this is, at least from shot reading, is not really how it's meant to be read. I think that her reading is really quite beautiful. And I think that, again, when it comes to Torah commentary, we're not stuck or fixed only to the Peshat. We are expected to go deeper. And I think what she does in this particular teaching is really draws our attention, as it should be, to who Miriam was. And unfortunately, as often is the case, right, what is left out of her story, and oftentimes what is only understood once the person is gone. And of course, the heartbreaking nature of that reality. And I think that we are seeing that, as I said, not just for Moses and Aaron personally, but really for the entire people. That sometimes it is that quiet kind of leadership, right? The kind of leadership that is steadfast, that is there always, especially in the most harrowing of circumstances, the situations in which sustenance is needed, in which water is needed, in which that kind of leadership that Miriam only could provide, when that is suddenly gone, the vacuum is vast. And the potential ultimately for things to unravel, as we see, takes very little time. And unfortunately, a lot of the damage that is done in this week's portion is going to be felt through the rest of the Torah, and really through the rest of time. In essence, we read these stories sort of from a bird's eye view of our ancestors, plucking out and picking out where they've misbehaved. But the reality is we are in each of these stories, right? And each of us has a Miriam in our lives in some form or the other who we maybe don't appreciate in the way they ought to be appreciated. And we shouldn't have to wait until they pass really to articulate that. So I think there's a lot of beauty in this teaching. I have to be honest with you, I was not familiar with Dean Prosser before. I need to investigate and learn more about her and her work, but I thought that she brought at least a very different kind of angle to our reading. And while I, as a New Yorker, appreciate sarcasm, it's my first language. There are times where sarcasm is maybe less useful than something a little bit sweeter like this. So, with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. And while we focused a little bit earlier in the... actually, no, we're right on the money. We're going to look for verse 10, again, of chapter 20. Chapter 20, verse 10 of the book of Numbers. In the Women's Torah commentary, that is on page 924. And in the Plaid Chumash, that will be on 1026. And so before we get to all of that good stuff, we're going to rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 362 for the beginning of Seder Kriyat HaTorah. Ein kamocha Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kemasecha malchut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha bechol dor v'hador. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch leolam va'ed, Adonai yahoz lamo yiten, Adonai yevarech et abo b'shalom, haba harachamim, eitiva bertzoncha et Zion. Tivnei chomot Yerushalayim, ki becha levad batachnu, melech el ram v'nisa, adon olamim. Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, ki כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. אחד אלוהינו גדול אדוננו קדוש שמו.
אחד אלוהינו גדול אדוננו קדוש שמו.
גדול אדוני ציון הרוממה שמו יחדיו. לך אדוני הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני הממלכה והמתנשא לכל הראש. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. Okay, reminder again, we're going to begin our reading in chapter 20. Oh, you know what? I gave the wrong pages. We're in chapter 21, verse 10. Chapter 21, verse 10. So in your Women's Torah commentary, that's page 928. 928. And in the Plab Chumash, it would be 1030. So 1030 in the Plad Chumash, 928 in the Women's Torah commentary, and again, Numbers chapter 21, verse 10. Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Halam Barach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim Venatan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. Amen. Vayisu Bnei Israel V'yachanu Ve'ovot. Vayisu Me'ovot. Vayachanu b'nei ha'avarim bamidbar asher al pnei Moav mimizrach hashamesh misham nas'u vayachanu b'nachal zered misham nasu vayachanu מעבר ארנון אשר במדבר היוצא מגבול האמורי, כי ארנון גבול מואב, בין מואב ובין האמורים. על כן יאמר בספר מלחמות אדוני, ואת והה בסופם, ואת הנחלים ארנון, ואשד הנחלים אשר נטע לשבט ונשען לגבול מואב, ומשם באר הוא הבאר, אשר אמר אדוני למשה, אסוף את העם, ואתנה להם מים. אז ישיר ישראל את השירה הזאת עלי באר, ענו לה באר, חפרוע שרים, קרוע נדבי העם, במחוקק במשענותם, וממדבר מתנה, וממתנה לחליאל, ומן חליאל במות, ומבמות הגיע אשר בשדה מואב ראש הפסגה, ונשקפה על פני הישימן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם, נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה. And while we have our Torah in our midst, we'll turn to offer our Mishaberach that can be found on page 371. Mishaberach Avotenu v'imotenu Avraham, Yitzchak v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel v'Leah, v'yivarech et hacholim ha'elu. We begin this morning by thinking of Jim Cohn, Monique Renee Banks Rathbun, Lindsay Epstein, Francis Scavone, Dolores Michka, Sylvia Orn, Yerachmiel Ben Hinda, Paloma Chauhan, Samuel Moskowitz, Audrey Lubo, Chaim Leib, Robert Posner and Joyce Weinberg, Rick Gold, Stu Pollack, Jane London, Catherine Guarino, Emunah Chaba, Deirdre Klein, Stephanie Skitt, Judy Stern, Miriam Kornfeld, Raz Brody, Chana Ruth Batsara, Marlise Silverberg, Susan Spruce, Fagel Tzipora, Bat Elisheva Bat Sarah, Richard Gambino, Michelle Sawicki, Idle Basha Bat Yitzchak, Tzvi Menachem Ben Chaim, Rivka Bat Devora, Amy and Gavin Tucker, Janice Kurz, David Dowling, Neil, Israel Ben Yitzchak, Ben Sion Ben Moshe, Lorraine Danis, Buddy Kossoff, Shelley Newmark, David Kyle Klotman, Rivka Bat Rachel, Sarah Bat Chana, Moshe Eliezer Ben Sivia, Peretz Ben Yehuda, and Leah Bat Naomi. And if you're thinking of anyone else this morning who's in need of healing, you can mention their names out loud at home or simply hold them in their hearts. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yimaleh rachamim alehem lahachalimam ulerapotam ulechazikam v'yishlach lehem mehera refuah shlema min hashamayim refuat hanefesh refuat haguf hashta ba'agala v'zman kariv v'nomar amen. May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are suffering. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit, and let us say together, Amen. El na refana la, El na refana la, El na refana la, Refuah shelema. Refanalo, Elna refanalo, Elna refanalo, Refuah shelema. Okay, so this morning's Haftarah, which we'll get to in a second because we got to do Hagba first. Page 370 at the bottom of the page. We rise in body or spirit. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai biyad Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 tziva lanu Moshe. Okay, now we'll be seated at home if you're still standing. We'll offer our blessings before the Haftarah on page 372. And if you are following along at home and you have a Plaid Chumash, the reading will begin on page 1043. If you're following in another form, you're looking for Shoftim, Judges, chapter 11, verses 1 to 33. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim v'ratza b'divrehem hanemarim emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah u'v'Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo v'nvi'eh ha'emet v'tzedek. Just move the mic back over. Jephthah of Gilead, Yiftach HaGilgadi, was a mighty warrior, though he was a son of a prostitute. Gilad had fathered him. Gilad's wife had sons, and when they grew up, they drove Jephthah out, saying to him, "You are not going to inherit our father's property, because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and settled in the area of Tov, where some outlaws joined him and went out raiding with him. Not starting off so great for him. But time passed, and the Amorites went to war against Israel, and when the Ammonites attacked Israel, the elders of Gilead went to bring Jephthah back from the area of Tov, and they said to Jephthah, "Come, lead us in battle against Ammon." Jephthah said to the elders of Gilead, "You hated me, you drove me out of my father's house, and now when you are in trouble, why do you come to me?" The elders of Gilead answered him, "But we have now turned back to you. If you come with us to fight the Ammonites, you will be in command of all of Gilead." And Jephthah replied to the elders of Gilead, "If you do bring me back to lead the fight against Ammon, and the Eternal hands them over to me, then I will be your commander." The elders said to Jephthah, "The Eternal will witness between us if we do not act as you say." Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people confirmed him as their commander-in-chief. In the presence of the Eternal at Mitzpeh, Jephthah repeated all the terms of the agreement. And Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, "What quarrel lies between us, that you have come to my land to fight me?" And the king of Ammon said to Jephthah's emissaries, "Because when Israel went up from Egypt, they took away my land from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, as far as the Jordan River, and now give it back peacefully." Jephthah sent still more messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, "Thus says Jephthah, Israel took no land from Moab and Ammon. When they went up from Egypt, Israel traveled through the wilderness to the Sea of Reeds until they reached Kadesh. And then Israel sent a message to the king of Edom, asking to be allowed to pass through his land. The king of Edom refused. They also sent a message to the king of Moab, but he too refused. So Israel remained in Kadesh. And then they went by way of the wilderness, making a circle around the lands of Edom and Moab, keeping east of Moab. They camped on the other side of the Arnon River and Moab's border, but they never crossed that border. Then Israel sent messengers to the Amorite king Sichon, king of Heshbon, saying, "Please, let us cross your land to our own." But Sichon did not believe the Israelites would merely pass through his territory. So he mustered his army, camped at Jahaz, and attacked Israel. But the Eternal, the God of Israel, put Sichon and his army into the hands of Israel, who defeated them. In that way, Israel took over the land of the Amorites, who lived in that territory. And when they took possession of the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, from the wilderness all the way to the Jordan River. And now that the Eternal, the God of Israel, dispossessed the Amorites in favor of Israel, the people of the Eternal are going to take it over? Do you not hold whatever your God, Chemosh, has given to you as a holding? So will we hold whatever the Eternal, our God, has given to us? Are you really any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he dare contend with Israel? Did he dare wage war against them? 300 years Israel has been settled in Heshbon and Aror, and the towns surrounded them, and the cities along the Arnon River. Why didn't you try to take them back all that time? No, I have done you no wrong. It is you who are wronging me by making war on me. The Eternal, the Judge, will decide this day between the people of Israel and the people of Ammon." But the king of Ammon paid no attention to the message Jephthah had sent to him. Then the spirit of the Eternal settled on Jephthah. He went through Gilead and Manasseh, passing Mitzpah of Gilead, and from there he passed to the army of Ammon. Jephthah made this vow to the Eternal: if you hand the people of Ammon over to me, then I will offer to the Eternal as a whole burnt offering whatever comes out of my house to meet me when I come home, safe from the Ammonites. Jephthah then crossed over to do battle against the Ammonites, and the Eternal put them into his grasp. He routed them with a terrible slaughter from Aroer as far as Minth, and all the way to Abel Keramim, 20 towns. So the Ammonites were subdued by the people of Israel. And as troubling as the end of that, you may remember that there is the part B to this story and the pledge that he makes. Do you know this story? So, I forget exactly when it comes up, but he returns home, right? He makes a pledge. He says if he wins the war, then he will offer a whole burnt offering, the first thing that he sees when he gets home. So, just imagine, right? He's picturing in his mind, he's going to see the flocks beforehand. And then, unfortunately, his daughter, if I remember correctly, comes running out to see him. So it's, yeah. Haftarahs are not simple things. By the way, just to make a small plug for it, for anybody who's watching it, and it wasn't on the Torah study, I'll give you the direct link, but my teacher, Rabbi Dov Luria, who I've quoted a few times over the summer, who's been doing this remarkable writing over the whole last year, going through the Torah each week and writing really beautiful commentary. So he decided after finishing really from where he started last year that he's going to start with Haftarot. And so he's making commentary each week on them, and this week's was really brilliant. So if anybody's interested, I'll give you the thing. But he has a blog, I think, on the Times of Israel website. So they put his stuff up weekly, so you can look at. But it's again Rabbi Dov Luria. Anyway, back to our Haftarah and our closing blessing, page 372. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim tzadik v'chol hadorot ha'el ha'neman ha'omer ve'oseh המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת Amen. We will now rise in body or spirit as we turn to page 376 to offer a prayer for our country, and then on page 377 a prayer for the state of Israel. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. O guardian of life and liberty, may our nation always merit your protection. Teach us to give thanks for what we have by sharing it with those who are in need. Keep our eyes open to the wonders of creation and alert to the care of the earth. May we never be lazy in the work of peace. May we honor those who have died in defense of our ideals. Grant our leaders wisdom and forbearance. May they govern with justice and compassion. Help us all to appreciate one another and to respect the many ways that we may serve you. May our homes be safe from affliction and strife, and our country be sound in body and spirit. Amen. We'll turn to page 377, a prayer for the state of Israel. Avinu Shabashamayim Tzur Yisrael v'goalo barech et medinat Yisrael reshit tzmichat geulatenu. Again alea be'evrat chastecha ufros alea sukat shlomecha ushlach orcha v'amitcha l'rasheha sareha v'yoatzeha v'taknem be'etzat tova milfanecha v'natata shalom ba'aretz v'simchat olam liyoshveha v'nomar amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. We will remain standing in body or spirit as we turn back to page 374 to conclude our Torah service. Yehallelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkav Shemo levado, Odo al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, Livnei Yisrael Am Keropo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Ki lekach tov natati lachem, torati al tazoru. Etz chaim hi lamhachazikim ba, letomchecha meushar deracheha, darchei noam, vechol netivoteha, Shalom Hashivenu Adonai Elecha ben Hashuva Chadesh Chadesh Yameinu Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. We'll turn now to page 586 at the bottom of the page, Aleinu L'Shabeach. Aleinu L'Shabeach Ladon HaKol Latet Gula Leotzer Breshit Shelo Asanu Kigoye Ha'aratzot Velo Samanu Kemishpechot Adama Shelo Sam Chalkenu Kahem Vegor Aleinu Kechol Hamonam Vanachnu Korim Umishtachavim Umodim Lifnei Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'nehemar V'haya Adonai L'melech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad. Now invite those in mourning and those observing yahrzeit to rise in body or spirit, as first we remember those who have passed in our community in recent months. Miles Ambrose, Morris Dickstein, Fred Eber, Sandra Furman, Evelyn Gelb, Lucy Gladstone, Lois Herr, Phyllis Katz, Jeanette Kopp, Jerry Monroe, Madge Judith Parcher, Steve Popkin, Danielle Lisa Rigg, Geraldine Rosen, Harriet Roth, Paul Silver, Joan Strong Tangzilius, Virginia Tizer, Marjorie Weinberg Berman, and Ann Weiss. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Florence Bass, Charles Bookstaver, Edith Cohen, Louis Davidow, Linda Dion, Dr. Harry Diner, Nathan Dobson, Eli Doctorow, Stephen Dror, Lee Friedman, Jacob Goldstein, Carolyn Gottfried Kahn, Esther Green, Eddie Riskin Greenberg, Helen Bernstein Katz, Ruth Clapper, Herman Kropp, Louis Levine, Peter Marks, Mary Matlis, Stephen McRae, Grace Mazel, William Metzger, Jerry Monroe, Murray Peak, Burnett Roth, Gertrude Schwab, Abraham Silverberg, Irving Tromberg, Ben Tuft, Pearl Tempowski, Bertha Warter, Herman Wiener, and Andrea Winnemer. And if there's anyone else for whom you're saying Kaddish that we didn't mention, certainly mention their names at home right now. And again, I'll invite the mourners to rise in body or spirit and join me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'le'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata d'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for a blessing. Please be seated at home if you're still standing. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Some quick announcements. First, of course, is to join us for Torah study beginning at 12 o'clock on Zoom. A reminder that on Monday, the Nina Mitzvah group will meet on at 11:30. Please contact Andrea Fagan for more information if you'd like to join. The Social Justice Committee will have its regular meeting on Zoom at 5 o'clock, and the Musar Practice Group with Myra Peskowitz is at 7 o'clock also on Zoom. My regular weekly Zoom class on Wednesdays, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel and his book, The Prophets, is again Wednesdays at noon. My Friday class, A Journey to the Heart of the Siddur, begins at 9 o'clock. On Thursday, June 24th, we celebrate Gay Pride Month with our guest speaker on Zoom, Chris Harrison, who will speak on, quote, taking up space, being black and bisexual in the Jewish community. This will be followed generously with a QA session, again, all on Zoom, so please do sign up. Also coming up on Sunday, June 27th at 11 a.m. is the next installment of Ruth Joseph's wonderful book group. If you are interested in joining, you must email Ruth directly to make arrangements. RuthEJoseph@yahoo.com, as I recall. If you have any questions, please let Ruth know, or if you don't know how to get in contact with Ruth, or having trouble getting in contact with Ruth for some reason, let us know in the office and we will make sure to make the connection. Also, a reminder, on Thursday, July 1st at 5 o'clock, we have a really special event. It is both available in person, but also on Zoom. The in-person part, I imagine, is weather-related, and it's with Emma Walton Hamilton. She is a best-selling and award-winning author, editor, stage, television, and podcast writer, producer, performer, and arts director. She'll be speaking on the topic, Raising Readers, Why Getting and Keeping Kids Engaged with Books Matters More Than Ever. Again, all the information for this should be on the flyer on the website. If you have questions, please contact Toby Spitz. Everything else, just keep an eye out for your regular weekly e-blasts. The July calendar should be coming out pretty soon. And I think that's everything on my announcements. So, Cantor, if you want to come back up for Kiddush, you can join me. And we're on page 604, if memory serves me. Let's see if I was right. 603, 604. Very good. And if you have grape juice or wine handy, you're welcome to join. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti le'olam v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim et ha'aretz v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam u'bayom hashvi Shabbat v'inafash Shabbat v'inafash Shabbat v'inafash v'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Al ken be'erach Adonai et Yom HaShabbat v'yikadshehu savri Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen Amen. Chaim? Chaim. Okay, Shabbat Shalom everybody. Hope to see most of you for Torah study in just a little bit. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week. Good Shabbos.